Sita's marriage. Rajkumari Sita was not destined to rule Videha, although it is what we all hoped and prayed for. She spent many months traveling with Janak Baba throughout the kingdom as, she, as he set up local councils, identifying leaders and directing them on how to manage their local affairs. For many of the villagers, Rajkumari Sita's presence was an indication that she was one day to be the Maharaja's successor. Maharaja Janak perceived this expectation and knew that he had to squash it, lest it lead to much disappointment. So, the conversation of a Swayamvara took place again, and again Sunainamma objected, pleading for more time. We are doing the kingdom an injustice by allowing the people to believe that one day she will govern here when we know this to be untrue, Sunaina, Janak Baba told her in a firm voice. But then why have you given her this training, this knowledge, if not to govern? She will bring this knowledge wherever she goes. It is for the future and not just for the Mithila. She sighed. I cannot imagine any man worthy of her. He has already made himself known to her, and I assure you he is worthy. Where is he? Who can this man be? Janak Baba shook his head, saying he didn't know, but he recounted what Sita had told him that day in the forest many months earlier. We should not stand in the way of their union. Let us organize the Swayamvara. I am sure he will appear and Sita will recognize him. There was nothing more Sunainama could say. Mata did not object when her father told her it was time to organize the Swayamvara. But one evening, as they were sitting together, and Soma and I were serving them sweets, I heard Janak Baba mention that ever since he had announced the Swayamvara, her mood had changed. Will I know him? Mata asked in an uncertain voice. Will I recognize him? He did appear to you, Sita. You saw his form. She shook her head. I heard his voice. I felt his presence, but I did not see a form. He was quiet for a few minutes and then said, Sita, everything that has come to you, all the events of your life, seem to have been predetermined, as if you had orchestrated it before being born. I have no doubt that this will be the same. She smiled. You have a way of easing my every concern. I will put the matter out of my mind. The Swayamvara was still weeks away. All the Rajas in the Aryan region had been invited. Sita did indeed put the matter out of her mind by spending time in the villages and helping with the seedings of the fields. Janak Baba had taught all the farmers how to use a newly developed plough that made the readying of their fields for planting so much quicker and easier, despite the heavy labor it entailed. Sita now had the desire to learn the same. One day, just before the Swayamvara, she took Soma and me to one of the nearby farms and indicated her desire to help them plough the field. There was great resistance. Allowing the Maharaja to perform this arduous task was one thing, but Rani, that was quite another. But Mata insisted. Through an unexplained show of strength, she was able to proceed, seemingly without much effort. Several minutes later, she dropped the plough and fell on her knees, digging her hands deep into the soil. Soma and I ran to her, thinking she might be in need of help, but she had no such need. Look, Soma, she said. Look at Vasundarama, the gift she has given us. There is vital life in the soil that prevents illness, that keeps our bodies well, life that we cannot see or touch. As long as we keep our soil pure, diseases will stay away. This is the gift of Vasundarama. Her face was glowing as she lifted handfuls of dark, rich soil and rubbed it against her cheek, and then kissed the very dirt that gives us life. How little do we think of where our food comes from, she murmured. How little do we appreciate this treasure she has given. Sita released the dirt and stood up. Looking off into the distance, she murmured, He's here. I feel his presence. She then went back to plowing. After she had completed her task, Sita thanked the farmer for allowing her to help and then inquired about the chariot that had stopped while she was in the field. It was the two Rajas, kings or princes from Ayodhya, he replied. They had stopped to request water for their horses. Ayodhya? Sita murmured to herself. She seemed lost in thought. Yes, one of the Rajas noticed you in the field and asked about the woman plowing in the soil. He said that he had never seen a plow like that or imagined a woman could use such an instrument. What did you tell him? I told him it was Rajkumari Sita. He seemed very surprised, but he smiled and said he was eager to meet the woman who could accomplish such a feat. Clearly, he doesn't know our Rani, said the farmer affectionately. A flutter moved through Mata's body when she heard his words. She turned to Soma and I could see the look that passed between them. I wondered if the Raja from Ayodhya was the one for whom she was waiting. During the evening meal, Sunaina teased Mata about her use of the plough. How is it possible that our daughter could use such an instrument when the farmers themselves struggle? With a gleam in his eye, Janak Baba turned to Mata and said, Tell her, dear, how do you accomplish such a feat? It is a matter of mind, Ma. I don't have the needed strength in my body, but my mind overcame that weakness. It instructed my body what to do, and my body merely followed. It is a training Pitaji has given me. Sunanama shook her head. I am sure the whole kingdom will be speaking of it. And the Rajas from Ayodhya inserted Urmila, who had heard the story of their arrival as it had already circulated through the household. They have come? Asked Sunainama in surprise. Didn't we receive a response from Maharaja Dasharatha that they were away at the hermitage of Rishi Vishwamitra? It seems they have come for another purpose, to view Mahadev's bow, but no doubt they will participate in the Swayamvara. He gazed at Sita as he spoke, aware of the quiver that was passing through her. Mata looked away as not to betray her feelings. Suddenly it dawned on Sunenama that the Rajas had seen Sita plowing in the field. A look of dismay crossed her face. They have seen you plowing, Sita? What will they think? Mata didn't respond. They will think, what an amazing daughter we have. Janak Baba was quick to reply. Whoever wins Sita's hand will have to know who she is and will have to respect her knowledge. As far as I am concerned, that is the only requirement. Then why have we set the test to be lifting of Mahadev's bow? Ma, it's not the strength that is needed to lift that bow, said Sita. I did it as a child. That bow can only be raised by the one Mahadev allows to lift it. If it is his will, that will prevail. That is the reason for this requirement. Janak Baba smiled. He had never told this to Sita, but he was pleased that she knew it. It was not strength alone that would determine who her husband would be. It was Mahadev's will, and as he was increasingly coming to understand, Sita's will as well. It was at the temple that they first met. Mata was performing Aarti, ritual of light, before the Murti, the statue of Parvati Ma. He had heard of the temple's beauty and was drawn by the otherworldly singing that drifted over the hills and through the trees of Mithila. It rose to his senses like a celestial song. Mata was dressed in her best finery, as was always the case when she went to the temple. Two servants, Usha and Rohana, carried the fruits and flowers for the puja. Soma was with them. They did not notice his approach, but they did notice Mata's voice grow softer and softer as she was completed the arti. When she had finished, she turned and saw him standing but a few feet from her. The servants also became aware of the presence of the two Rajas from Ayodhya. Mata froze, and for several minutes they didn't know whether our Mata was in our world or another. The one who appeared to be the elder of the Rajas also seemed to freeze. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. It was a younger Raja who broke the silence, introducing himself as Lakshman and his brother Ram. Urmila responded by introducing herself and Sita. Still, there was silence between the elder prince of Ayodhya and Mata. Although they continued to gaze at one another as if in a stupor, no one knew what was taking place between them. So, you are Rajkumari Sita, Sri Ram finally said. I saw you the other day in the field from a distance. I could see you lift the soil to your cheeks so tenderly, with the love of a mother embracing a child. Yes, that was me. We teach the people of Videha to love and honor Vasundarama, she replied softly. She is the source of our strength. I would like to learn your ways so I can bring this knowledge back to Ayodhya and all of the Kosala kingdom. And we are happy to share with you our knowledge, came a booming voice from the back of the temple. I'm happy to receive you, sons of Maharaja Dasharatha. Janak Baba was overjoyed to meet them. After receiving them warmly, he said, Ram, your fame precedes you. All of Mithila has heard of your deeds. It is a great honor to have you here in our kingdom, and I would be happy to share with you our methods of farming. That night, as Rohana, Usha, Soma, and I were serving the evening meal, Sunainama stopped us and asked with a discreet smile, I am told you all saw the Rajas from Ayodhya at the temple today. I was not so fortunate to be there. Tell me, how did they look? How did they appear? Sita will tell me nothing. She is silent when I ask about them, as is the Maharaja. All eyes turned to Sita, but she kept eating as if the conversation did not concern her. Rohana was the first to respond. Maharani, never have I seen such strength in a man. The older Raja, his arms, his chest, such perfection, she gushed. And such beauty, replied Usha. I did catch a glimpse of his face and saw such perfectly formed features, so well proportioned. Sunainama pressed her, asking for some description, but she was speechless and could not say more. And you, Meenakshi? Sunainama asked. I'm sorry to say I was not there. Turning to Soma, she asked eagerly, how did he appear? What did you see about him? Soma didn't answer, and so the Maharani prodded her. Share with us, Soma. It seems they are all referring to the older Raja. Ram, how did he appear to you? Maharani, please excuse me, but I don't know how to answer your question. What do you mean? She asked. You were there. Maharani, I was blinded by the light coming from his farm. The light was so strong, I had to turn my eyes away. Mata had put aside her food and was listening the whole time to this exchange. Suddenly, she interjected with a smile. Soma sees what I see, but Soma, you must learn to look steadily into the light. If you had, you would have seen his celestial form as I did. Never look away from the light. I did turn away, but then when I looked at him again, I did see his form, his human form, Mata. Turning to Sunaina, she continued. I don't really know how to describe him. Rohana is right about his strength. He's not as tall as our Maharaja, but his chest is broader, and every muscle seemed defined. And Usha is right about his beauty. The features of his face are quite fine, with a slender, straight nose and full lips. His complexion is like Mata's, but slightly more golden. His hair falls to his shoulders and is not quite as dark as Mata's. He keeps it loose so that it frames his face. There is a dignity about him in the way he carries himself. I was close enough for a moment to catch a glimpse of his eyes, and I have no words to describe them, just as I cannot describe our Mata's eyes. Sita laughed at her words and then commented, you describe only his outer form, Soma. Soma was quiet for a few minutes and then added, he seemed so approachable, not at all distant and formal like so many of the Rajas, but very personable, almost modest. So he seemed to me, but it is impossible to truly describe. Her voice trailed off. Sita turned to her mother and said with a smile, everyone will see him differently, Ma. You will have to wait and see how he appears to you. As they were discussing thus, I recalled an earlier conversation that had taken place before the arrival of the Rajas from Ayodhya, when one night over the evening meal, Sunainama had spoken of Sri Ram's achievements, his bravery and courage that enabled him to slay the demoness Taraka. A frown had crossed Sita's face. Seeing her troubled look, Janak Baba had turned to Sita and asked, why does this, my Sita? I wonder if such violence is necessary. And the slaying of a woman? Is that not against the laws of nature? All eyes had turned to Mata in surprise. In a grave tone, Janak Baba responded, I would never question any deed performed by Ram. What he did was for the benefit of the whole region. Mata had not pressed the point, but it was clear that she was not satisfied with his response. Janak Baba had then quickly turned the conversation to Ram's freeing of Lady Ahalya from the curse that had been imposed upon her by her husband Gautama Maharshi. The story, commonly told, was that the beautiful Ahalya had been tricked and seduced by Indra, the king of the gods. Gautama was angered when he discovered this betrayal and cursed this innocent Ahalya to become like stone. No sage in all of Videha has had the courage to go near her, yet alone attempt to free her. And who would even have the power to reverse a curse? He asked, gazing at Sita. And yet Ram approached her as he would his own mother and freed her from her agony. Is there any compassion greater than that? Sita had been visibly moved. That was a very great deed. She was unjustly cursed through no cause of her own. The story as it is told is not what truly happened, but the important thing is that Ram freed her. How rare for someone to undo a curse. Even our rishis cannot accomplish this. Again, we see how these curses of the sages affect the innocents. That someone so pure and wise as Sage Ahalya, who is a rishi in her own right, would be so afflicted, causes me much pain. Someday perhaps someone will be able rectify this, Sita. Increasingly, we see that the sages are abusing their power, and perhaps it is time for it now to be withdrawn, Janak Baba had then said. As I recall this conversation, I wondered if Mata's concern over the killing of Taraka would influence her feeling for the Raja from Ayodhya. But fortunately, it was not to be so. The bow of Mahadev had rested in the palace temple for many generations. As the palace was restructured, rebuilt, and expanded over the years, the bow remained where it had been placed so many generations earlier. It was part of the history of our kingdom. Everyone in the kingdom knew that the bow had been given to the ancestor of Janak Baba by Parashurama himself when his work in the world was completed. This was the very bow that Mahadev had given to Parashurama, the sixth avatar or incarnation of Vishnu, to perform his duty of ridding the earth of the violent Kshatriyas, the warriors who had overstepped their bounds and spread conflict everywhere. Parashurama gave the bow to the kingdom of Videha because he said it was the only kingdom where the bow's power would never be abused and never used for warfare, only for worship. He had foreseen that then that ours would be the kingdom that lived by the rule of dharma, not by armed force. We would not expand, would not grow powerful, would not conquer our neighbors, and would not invest in armies and weaponry. We would treasure above all else the wisdom of the rishis and be ruled by wise leaders. Janak Baba had received word during meditation that the lifting and stringing of the bow should be the requirement of Sita's suitors. He knew then that some transition was in store. Whoever lifted that bow would take with him not only the jewel of Mithila, Rajkumari Sita, but also the protection and power of the bow. This would begin the decline of Videha, but he did not mourn. In the moment of time, kingdoms come and kingdoms go. Videha had contributed much and would continue to do so. But it was not in the destiny of his kingdom to lay the foundation for future civilizations. That this realization came to him and he accepted it without the slightest concern or care. The time for the Swayamvara was upon us. Rajas and Maharajas from the entire Arya region came to participate. We were so busy with preparations that there was hardly any time to be with Mata, except to attend briefly to her personal needs. None of us in the household were surprised by the outcome of the Swayamvara. From the day when we first heard of Mata's meeting with Sri Ram in the temple, we all suspected that he was destined to be her husband. But still, we had to go through the suspense of the competition. Mata was calm and composed throughout the course of events. I am told that even when other Rajas came close to lifting the bow, she did not display any concern. When Sri Ram lifted and then broke the bow, the family breathed a sigh of relief. But Sri Ram announced that he would come the next day to make sure that Rajkumari Sita accepted the results. She would have a day to reflect and decide her future. Until then, no announcement was made. The next morning, Sri Ram arrived at the palace with his brother and spent time privately with Mata, Janak Baba, and Sunainama. We never heard what was spoken, only that Mata had accepted Sri Ram as her husband. Word usually traveled very quickly through the palace, and there was hardly anything that we all did not soon come to know. One servant spoke to another, and the one spoke to another, and this is how we heard so many of the stories of our beloved Janak Baba and Mata. But on this occasion, no word leaked out. Several days later, after one of the evening meals, a servant who had been serving the food called the kitchen staff together and recounted what he had heard during the meal. Janak Baba had remarked how fortunate it was that Sri Ram and Lakshman had arrived in Mithila just in time for the Swayamvara. Sri Ram smiled and said it was no accident. When Janak Baba asked him to explain, Ram was quiet for a few minutes but then replied that the battle with Taraka had been very difficult. The more so because she was a woman, and it pained him to have to take the life of a woman, even though she had killed so many of the Hermitage students. That night, after the battle, when he lay down to rest, overcome with dismay, Ram felt a great presence come over him. It brought a sense of peace and love, healing him of the pain he felt from the battle. It was an overarching presence, and he drifted to sleep in the comfort of its arms. But by morning it was gone, and he wondered if he had imagined it. As he approached Mithila, he felt the presence again. When they stopped to get water for their horses, and he saw Rajkumari Sita in the field, he knew who it was that had come to comfort him in his distress. Sri Ram then turned to face Mata and told her that when he saw her kissing the soil, he took that as a sign that she had forgiven him for killing the woman demon. The servant continued his narration. Mata listened quietly as he spoke. When he had finished, she replied, I have realized that sometimes a demon takes a woman's form so that the warrior will refrain from doing what needs to be done. But you were not deceived. When I first heard the news of her death, I also felt sorry over the deed. But then I realized she was a woman only in outer appearance. The test was to see beyond her outer form to the demonic nature that was inhabiting that body. which is neither male nor female. It was Vasundarama who told me this that day in the field, and that is why I kissed the soil in gratitude for helping me to understand this. She had made me aware of a deeper truth. Sri Ram seemed touched by her words, but then he added in a serious tone, the death of Taraka is not the end. I am afraid many more battles lie ahead, difficult battles. The servant stopped his narrative. Go on, urged Usha. What else did he say? Why did he mean? What did he mean? And how did Mata respond? I couldn't hear any more, he replied. That is all I heard. Oh dear, I exclaimed. I hope for them a peaceful future full of joy and happiness, not fighting demons. None of us should worry, interjected Soma. Whatever Raja Ram will do will be for the protection and benefit of us all. I have no doubt that he will succeed in all of his endeavors. After all, he is one chosen by our Mata. Now came the wedding preparations, the reception of the guests from Ayodhya, and the ceremonies themselves. It was an exhilarating time, but also one of the sadness for me as I realized that the time of Mata's departure was approaching. I could not imagine what life would be without her. Janak Baba would retreat more and more into solitude. Sunanama would assume more responsibilities for governing, and we servants would be left without the one who has lit up the palace and brought us so joy. I was just coming to accept this reality when a new window of hope and possibility opened.